Hi again then guys, and welcome to another replica build on Gran Turismo 6, and this time we're replicating a car which is technically related to this vehicle that's on the game, but it's a alternative manufacturer version and also an alternative performance version. It's a higher up model of the Monaro. On GT6, of course, we have the Monaro from the Holden dealership, whereas the car which I'm replicating is the UK version. Essentially, it's the Vauxhall Monaro, and the particular car that I'm replicating is actually the top of the Monaro tree. You've got the normal Monaro, then you've got the VXR, which has a 6-litre engine, and then you've got the VXR 500, which is basically a slight performance upgrade to the VXR 6-litre to give it 500 horsepower. It's the quickest Vauxhall ever produced in a straight line here in the UK, and a seriously powerful car just in general. Now, visually, we have made some changes, but we don't really need to run through them, because all I've done is fitted it with silver paint, and of course that's totally down to you because it's available in a number of colours, but the silver that I went for actually comes with the car. It's Quicksilver Metallic, so it's very easy to find, and the reason why I chose that is because I like the car in silver, but also I wanted to keep it on brand. Now for the rims, I went for Oz Ultraleggera. First of all, they're not exactly like the real car's rims. There are some other rims which have the correct amount of spokes, because the Monaro VXR 500 has kind of a 5-spoke arrangement with 2 spokes each. So it's actually a 10-spoke, but arranged to look more like a 5. In kind of a snowflake design, but not really as much as a BBS wheel. So these technically have 2 spokes too many, but it's the style of rim that I wanted to go for the most, and these have the most similar appearance to the rims. They just happen to have too many spokes. So it depends what you want. You could go for 5 spokes, or 10s that look like 5, or you could do what I've done and go for the 6s, the Oz Ultraleggeras. Either way, do whatever you want. That's it for the visuals. Obviously the real VXR has a much more aggressive body kit, a ducktail wing, etc., but we can't do any of that stuff. So, we'll go over first of all, of course, to the mechanical side of things, and then, as we always do, take it out to a racetrack to see what kind of improvements it makes to the car. Now, thankfully, I was actually able to find some really good numbers to be able to work with, and without really having to go through a lot of trouble, I was able to round it off, as you can see, to 525 pp. And I'm always really happy when I'm able to do that, because to have a nice replica is great, but if you can actually make it pp relevant, so that if you want to race it or use it in seasonals, etc., you actually do have the option of doing so as efficiently as possible. So it really is snuggled up to that PP ceiling, if you will, of 525. Now, as far as the numbers, they are slightly different from, for instance, the brochure numbers, where it's quoted at just under 500 horsepower. But the reason for that is actually because the guys who built the car and did the upgrades initially, on a slight side note, built the engine to produce 600 horsepower with reliability to prove what it could do. Then when they'd done that, Vauxhall said yes, go ahead and do this special version, and the actual car has been benchmarked at 503 horsepower, which is why I've put the number that high, because if you can have more, why not do that? Now, as far as the tyres, I've gone for sport softs, as you can see, because of course it's more of a street-based machine. For the brakes, likewise, it's a street car, so you don't want it to feel too good. You could upgrade them if you want to, but it's not really authentic. As far as suspension, we've dropped the ride height to 110. Springs I've just stiffened up a little bit to 550 and 5. Dampers and anti-roll I've left on 3, because again, it's a street car. You don't want it to feel too aggressive or too stiff. And after all, the Monaro is a very playful vehicle, and I wanted to keep that. We've gone for neutral camber and tow, but of course adjust those if you feel the need. We'll come back to the gearbox in just a second. For the diff, and as always, I would recommend changing this around to personal preference, mess around, find what works best for you, but I've gone for the highest initial torque, and as you can see, the lowest acceleration and braking, and that gives it, I would say, good handling, but it can definitely drift if you want it to. All you need to do is brake a little bit earlier, take the corner a little more shallow than you usually would, and then just pile on the power, and the car will kick itself into a nice little drift. It's a very easy car to drift, a very easy build to drift. It won't necessarily maintain the longest drifts, but it can have fun, especially around tighter corners. Now, as far as power, we do have an oil change, so you need to bear that in mind, of course. And then we've actually managed to get it really nicely close PP-wise without having to reduce the power limiter that much. I would recommend the supercharger, because of course the real car is supercharged, and then a stage 2 engine tune, and then reduce the power to 96%. You could go for the quoted brochure numbers, which I think is 493 horsepower or so, but why have less when you can have more? And as far as the weight, the quoted weight that I could find is, as you can see, 1,687 kilos. So you want to add a 29 kilo ballast. Incidentally, I've put that all the way to the back, but it actually doesn't change the weight distribution enough to change the numbers. So you don't really need to do that. I just wanted to. And finally, for the gearbox, I was very thankfully able to find the actual gear ratios of the VXR model's gearbox. I'm not sure if there were any changes between the VXR and the VXR 500, but as far as I know, I don't think there were. I may be wrong, but I don't think there were. So you want an auto setting of 205, then individual gears of 2.97, 2.07, 1.43, 1, 0.84 and 0.57, with the actual car's final drive of 3.73. Kind of a skewed looking gearbox, as you can see, but in practice it works pretty nicely. So that's it overall for the build. Now let's take it out to a track. Overall, as I mentioned just now, I wanted the car to be, above all else, of course accurate to the real machine, but also fun. The Monaro is known in both normal and VXR forms to be a fun car, a car which likes to get sideways, which likes to shred its tyres, and it's basically a very American style vehicle. It's like a modern muscle car. In effect, it is an Aussie muscle car with an LS1 engine. You can get sideways so easily around corners in this thing. The handling is good when you want it to be, but as you can see, definitely playful when you want it to be. On sports tyres, it handles great. On racing tyres, it would doubtless be even better. As far as overall performance, it's not necessarily going to win a lot of races due to the weight in particular, but for the fun factor, I'm really happy with this. It's a fun car to drive, especially for someone like me who is a massive Monaro fan. I like cars that offer huge amounts of power for cheap prices, and Monaros really are dirt cheap in used form, at least here in the UK. So overall, if you do decide to use this VXR 500 replica, obviously I hope you find it fun, first and foremost, and potentially useful for racing as well. And if you'd like to, of course, keep up with other tunes like this on the channel, you can hit subscribe down below. And for now, as always, thanks for watching.